Hello. So for the past month, I have been working on a completely different video. It was supposed to be a video about romance novels and romance subplots in non-romantic fiction. I was gonna do like a critical examination of all of that, both through the lens of a publishing world and the literary community. However, I had everything done. The research was done. The notes were made. The script was made. However, when it came to the recording, it was crap. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong, and in the end I did manage to record some video, but honestly every time I look at it I have a physical reaction to it. I hate it so much. I want to burn that video. I don't want to just delete that video. I want to burn it. I want to bury it underground. And I was thinking, I don't want to put out a video like that. Because of that, I decided to make this video today where I'm just gonna go over some books that I started my year with. But yeah, instead of having no video again for 3 months, I just decided why not record this video and talk about some of the books that I have recently read. There are, I think, 10 books in total that I'm gonna discuss, and the first book is the only nonfiction that I'm gonna talk about. I did read some other nonfictions, specifically Thornhedge, but I'm not gonna discuss that. It's an okay book. Just go read it. But the book that I will talk about is DisneyWar by James B. Stewart. When you say to someone that you have read a 500-page business book about a specific time period of one company, you have to explain why, especially if you're not a business major. So this is, as I said, a business book that is talking about the Disney company during its Michael Eisner era, that is set in between like 1980s to 2005 when the book was published. And Michael Eisner was the previous CEO of the Disney company, who was before the current CEO, who is Bob Iger. I never thought I was gonna know so much about some business and about all these people, apparently. And what I find funny is if you know anything about the whole Michael Eisner leaving the Disney company, it's so funny how this book was published at the very beginning of 2005. And when I was reading this book, like prior to finishing it, I thought it was going to discuss the leaving of Michael Eisner, but the book ended with Michael Eisner still being the CEO. So it was really funny how the book came out right before Michael Eisner officially left. Talk about perfect timing. Now to the part of why I read this book in the first place. I like to rewatch a lot of videos, especially video essays, and one of my all-time favorite video essays are by Lindsay Ellis, and all of her Disney videos are some of my favorite. And if you've watched any of those, you know that she always references this book, DisneyWar by James B. Stewart. And as I said, I am not a business major, nor am I particularly interested in the lives of rich. I just really wanted to read this book for some reason, and I think the reason is because I was born in the 2000s, well, exactly 2000, and even though that period for the Disney movies was not the most prolific, obviously I grew up with the Disney Renaissance era movies. We're talking Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid. These are all huge Disney movies, you know, that kind of set the new standard, and all of them were done during the Michael Eisner era. And I think because I have a lot of nostalgic feelings towards anything Disney, I just wanted to know more about the Disney company as an adult. When you think of Disney movies, you think of them like in a very separate vacuum of a sort that has no connection to the real world. But unfortunately, it does. It was produced by these businessmen, and I feel like I had to reframe certain movies like that. Not necessarily like to, as I said, to taint an image of them, but just because I wanted to know more, and I think that's a good thing. I also want to make, not in the near future though, I want to make a video about all the Disney Renaissance era movies, so this was a really good informative book because it also goes in depth about a lot of the things that were happening behind the scenes while making the movie. I make it sound so sinister, like what was happening behind the scenes. I don't mean it that way, I just mean like what were Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg fighting this time when making movies together. There was a lot of drama though when it came to these businessmen. Like they say women are dramatic. You should read this book. It will change your mind. So yeah, if you want to learn more about the behind the scenes of your favorite Disney movies, you should definitely check this one out. However, I do recommend to listen to it as an audiobook because, as I said, it's a long book. Now, doing a full 180, we're gonna talk about fiction. Specifically, we're gonna talk about fantasy, and you will notice that a lot of the books that I will talk about today are kind of fairy tale inspired or just blatantly fairy tales. I have gone through a catalog of a couple of authors, one of them being T. Kingfisher, and I have read Nettle Bone and Thornhedge. To be honest, I don't have much to say about these books because what I remember about them is not specifically their plot. I don't think that's what's important about these books, but what is really interesting about them is their unique characterization of the characters and their atmosphere. So first, talking about Nettle Bone, this is a fantasy novel about Mara, who is a princess from a small kingdom, and she's setting out to save her other sister from an abusive prince that she had to marry, and she does so with a couple of people, some of them being a grave witch and her demon-infested chicken. That's what I mean about the characterization. First and foremost, I love that the main character is 30 years old. I think she's like 30 or maybe even older. No shade thrown at teenagers, but I don't want to read another book, like a epic fantasy story especially, where a 17-year-old is saving the world. Why can it not be a balance? Okay, we can have stories that feature very young characters, and we can have stories with 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, because I feel like it makes more sense for them to save the world than some 18-year-old. But also what I like about Mara is her characterization. She might on the first seem like a very passive character because she's very afraid, she's very anxious about everything that she's doing, but the reason why she's such a well-developed character is because in spite of that fear and anxiety, she's still pushing forward, she's still doing everything, and in turn she's motivating others around her. I think there is also a very nice balance done in this book between dark and cozy moments, because when I first started reading the book, it immediately hooked me. It had like very dark imagery about like collecting bones and like, making something out of them, and a lot of the things are dark, especially like the themes of abuse, assault, etc. But still there is a lot of cozy moments, especially because of the ways characters are caring about each other. So I really think that the balance was struck nicely. Now, as for Thornhedge, that is a novella about a woman called Toadling, and she was kidnapped by the Fae at a very young age as kind of the changeling process, and now she has to protect a tower where a dangerous maiden is in eternal sleep in, and she basically has to protect the tower from all the knights that want to rescue this maiden. So as you can see, this is a subversion of a fairy tale. I think this was inspired by either Sleeping Beauty or Rapunzel, but in this case, as you can see, the princess is the evil one. And this description really pulled me to the story. However, I have to be honest, when I started reading it, and I was listening to it as an audiobook, and as I said, it's a novella, it's a pretty short book, I still thought of DNFing it. There was something just missing about it, and I'm not really sure what was that, because especially I read it after Nettle Bone, I really saw similarities between Toadling and Mara. They were kind of the same character, to be honest, both these like anxious, shy characters that have to do the good and fight the evil. But with Nettle Bone, even though I didn't care that much about the plot, I was still able to read it because the atmosphere really pulled you in. And even though this atmosphere exists also in Thornhedge, there was something else missing. I also did feel as if the ending was a bit too sudden. I think the plot was not balanced out properly when it came to that. And I was thinking about, okay, maybe if the plot was expanded a bit more, maybe then I would have loved it. But honestly, if this was a full-on novella, I don't think I would have finished it. There was just something missing about this, and I'm not sure what. And if you've read the book and you felt the same way, can you also enlighten me? What do you think was missing? But either way, if you're into books that have very unique characterization of its characters and are looking for some cozy fairy tales that are also dark, then I think these might be for you. I had to take a break. You can track the passage of time with how flatter and flatter my hair is becoming. I just cannot have curls. My hair does not allow it. I also recently made this. Look at this. Look at it. Look at it. I think it's cute. There you go. So as I've said, I was going through a catalog of T. Kingfisher and one other author, and that author is Holly Black. And the books of hers that I was reading were from the Stolen Heir duology. I have a very unpopular opinion when it comes to The Cruel Prince, and that is that I don't like it. I read the first book years ago, so maybe I would have a different opinion of it now. I'm not sure. But basically, I was interested in Jude and Cardan, like how their storyline would develop. I just didn't really care about the courtly politics. I cared about no other characters. I couldn't get myself through it. Like, I did finish The Cruel Prince, but then for the second and the third book, I kind of skim read them. So that means that I was still interested in this world. I do like the way Holly Black writes Fae. I like that she writes them in a very folkloric way. When I saw that people online who loved The Cruel Prince didn't really like The Stolen Heir, I was more inclined to go pick up that book. Also, I saw that it was readily available in a library, and I kind of feel less pressure to pick up books in a library, especially books that I don't think I'm going to enjoy, but I still want to see maybe I'm in the wrong, because like I don't have to buy them, I just have to borrow them, and if I don't like it, I return it. But luckily for me, I did enjoy The Stolen Heir. So Stolen Heir is a YA fantasy novel that happens after the happenings of the Cruel Prince trilogy, and it follows Jude's brother Oak and Ren, or Suren, who is a young queen of the Court of the Teeth that has been living feral in the human world, trying to escape everything and everybody, but together she and Oak decide to retake her kingdom. And then Prisoner's Throne is the second and final book in this duology, where their shenanigans just continue, basically. And also because it is book 2, I cannot really give that many spoilers. There are a lot of things that I still don't really like about Holly Black's writing, and that's just like personal taste, but I did really on the whole enjoy these 2 books. However, I do have to say I liked Stolen Heir more than The Prisoner's Throne, and the reason for that is what I previously mentioned about people who liked Cruel Prince didn't like Stolen Heir that much, and that is because Stolen Heir really feels different to the Cruel Prince trilogy. It is kind of like an adventure fantasy. It is about characters going on a quest. Meanwhile, The Prisoner's Throne is much more like courtly politics, similar as The Cruel Prince was. And I kind of have a theory about that, where Holly Black listened to the fans saying that they don't like The Stolen Heir that much because it doesn't feel like The Cruel Prince, so she just tried to recreate The Cruel Prince again. I just wish that it kind of stuck to The Stolen Heir, because these 2 books really feel like there is a second book like missing in between. It feels like it was supposed to be a trilogy, and then there was a second book that was just completely erased, because not only are they completely different subgenres of fantasy, they're also told in a very different way. The narrative styles are different. In the first book, we are following Ren, and it is written in the first person. However, The Prisoner's Throne is following Oak the whole time and is written in the third person. And like, again, no shade to Oak, but I just wish we explored Ren as a character a bit more, because she was going through most change throughout these stories, and it just because of that, The Prisoner's Throne really felt off to me. Also, The Prisoner's Throne not only feels like The Cruel Prince because of its narration styles, etc., it feels like The Cruel Prince because there is a lot of characters from The Cruel Prince also inside of it. I just didn't really personally like that, and not just because I didn't like The Cruel Prince, but because the focus was completely removed from Oak and Ren, and it felt like this much bigger story than the 2 of them, and I don't think that was necessary specifically for their story. But even with all these criticisms, I still liked the books enough to purchase them. I found them secondhand and I was like, yeah, I want to have it. I wanted to commemorate liking a Holly Black book. And after I read these books, I still wanted to read some more fairy tale-esque stories, and specifically I wanted to read more books about Fae in a way that Holly Black writes them. So the first book that I picked up after that was another Holly Black book, How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories, which is kind of a collection of short stories about Cardan, and it was okay. The best part about that book were the illustrations. They were really gorgeous. And also I was super happy that my library had it. But after that, I moved on to more Slavic-inspired fairy tales, and we're talking about Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik and The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I am always anxious when I'm picking up Slavic fairy tales, because this word Slavic is usually used as a synonym for Russian. As a Slav myself, I can testify to say there are more Slavic cultures than just Russian. However, I can safely say that that is not the case for these two books, because Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik is set in a fantasy like Lithuania, which is not a Slavic country, but at some point in time, Lithuania and Poland were in like a commonwealth, so that's where the Slavic inspired comes from the Polish side. And The Bear and the Nightingale is specifically set in northern Russia, so it's not like, oh, it's a Slavic story and it's just like in Russia. No, it is specifically stated that it's in Russia. How many times can I say Russia? And a funny thing that I did is, because I picked both of them from my library, is that I was kind of reading them in tandem, so I was really able to compare them, because not only are they, as I said, Slavic inspired stories and they're fairy tales, they also feature very similar conflicts. It focuses on wicked fae destroying the environment that they live in, and also has very strong heroines. So Spinning Silver is a story in which we follow three women. We first have Miriam, who is a daughter of moneylenders that can spin silver into gold, and because of that she earns the attention of one and only wicked, frosty elf king. Then we have Wanda, who is trying to save herself and her brothers from her abusive father by trying to provide them a better life. And finally we have Irina, who I think actually that's her name. Irina, yeah, I think so. Yeah, who is a daughter of a local lord, and she is forced to marry a Tsar who is keeping a very dangerous secret to himself that of course is unraveled throughout the story. And their stories really intertwine, and one thing that I've noticed early on while reading the book is how complicated it was to read the book in the beginning. You kind of get used to this towards the end, but still, it was a very big problem in the beginning. Basically, as I said, it's about three women, and in the beginning you have these 3 points of view. However, you really cannot differentiate while you're reading whose point of view you're in, because all of them are in first person, and there is no signifier. Like, it's not like one chapter is in one person's point of view, another is in another. No, throughout the chapters, the POVs are constantly changing, and you really cannot tell who is who, especially in the beginning when you don't know really the characters and you're confused with their names still. So like, it can be very messy. And then later on, even more points of views that are introduced. But yeah, I just had to point that out, as like, that was a bit jarring. Also, I was very skeptical when I was going into this book, because I was talking about this book in one of my previous videos, but Naomi Novik also wrote Uprooted, and I have a very conflicting opinion about that book, because I didn't like its execution. I like the idea of the book, but yeah, in the execution and the writing, it kind of fell flat for me. Luckily, I can say that is not the case for Spinning Silver. Spinning Silver feels epic from the very start, and it feels like a big story. And I genuinely enjoyed all the plot lines. The heroines are very strong, and you really rooted for them the whole time. The story did drag itself in a couple of occasions. It could have been like shorter in some cases, and some things could have been expanded more, but all in all, I think it was a very well written fairy tale set in a wintry wonderland. Well, not exactly wonderland. A lot of stuff happens that is not wonderful, but still, you know what I mean. Now, as for The Bear and the Nightingale, yes, I know this is the second book. I already returned it to my library and I have the second book. But I guess this is a spoiler, because I did kind of like it enough to continue the trilogy. But yes, as I said, The Bear and the Nightingale is the first book in the trilogy. I forgot what the trilogy name was. This book tells the story of a girl called Vasya, who has a talent of seeing all the folkloric creatures, unlike all the other people in her village. She is, because of that, able to try and save them and help preserve the whole place that she's living, that she's calling her home, from very dangerous mystical entities. To be honest, it's kind of hard to explain this book, mainly because it is very big, but not big in a sense like Spinning Silver is. I mean like in a time frame. You're starting the story with before Vasya was even born, and you're like following her while she's growing up. But Vasya, even though she's the main character, she's not even like the main focus of the story, because every character you can think of in this book has its own POV. I wouldn't really say POV. I think this is more of an omni point of view type of a story. It feels very distant, kind of like fairy tales are. But I feel like that really attributed to making me get very lost throughout the book a lot of times. I couldn't really get into it, and I especially didn't like, because of that, a lot of the characters, with the exception of Vasya. Vasya is, to be honest, the best part of this whole book. She's the reason why I want to continue reading this story. She's just such a headstrong character, and I just love the way she's talking to folkloric creatures, and I love how many of them are introduced in this book. What I also liked about this book were its discussion on religion and like paganism, because this village was considered to be like pagan infested prior to the introduction of this priest character, who becomes throughout the story more and more corrupted. There is also another character of Vasya's stepmother who also becomes corrupted by the priest, and just you're seeing the entire village basically become corrupted by him and his preachings, or rather like him inflicting fear in them, and that is kind of the main cause of the conflict later on in the story. But what I really didn't like about this book were just certain tropes. So I guess maybe that's not the book's fault, it's just I really don't like these tropes. I kind of had a lot of expectations for the stepmother character, because I thought, okay, we're going to subvert this evil stepmother trope, but no, we didn't. The more I was reading the book, the more I realized, oh, so this will never change, like she will always just be an evil stepmother. Great. I just am really so bored with that trope, and I wish we retire it, please. But yeah, both The Bear and the Nightingale and Spinning Silver, really interesting fairy tales set in Slavic cultures, and they're in wintry settings. So if you're looking for that, definitely check it out. And also what I mentioned about like Holly Black type of fae, these are also featured in these stories. So look forward to that. Now the next one, you can see that I do read, in fact, a bit of everything, because this next one is a fanfic from a fandom that I never thought I was gonna read from. And I'm talking about Clean by Olivia Blake. So growing up, I never was really into Harry Potter, and especially I have no inclination to be into it now after J.K. Rowling showed us who she truly is. But the reason why I even stumbled upon this fanfic is because it was a book selected for a book club. When I saw that, I realized how long has passed since I've read fanfic the last time, and I just missed that feeling of reading fanfic, so I decided, why not? And I'm actually very happy that I read it, because this was a very enjoyable fanfic. It's also very well known, especially because Olivia Blake is now a published author. She has a lot of books that were well received, and even though I wasn't really inclined to read her work before, I am now, especially One for My Enemy. But yeah, this book is set in a Harry Potter fandom. This is specifically a Hermione fanfic, which means it is shipping Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. And instead of me trying to explain what this fanfic is about, let me just read you the AO3 excerpt. Hermione AU, year 6, with a slow burn and a killer twist. And boy, was it a slow burn. There is a belief in our society that fanfics are just poorly written stories that are grammatically incorrect, and they're all written by 12-year-olds who have nothing better to do with their life. And although yes, there are a lot of them that do kind of fit that mold, fanfics are so much more than that, and you can find really beautiful pieces of writings if you just allow yourself to read some fanfics. And this is luckily a very good one. This was a very well executed slow burn, and I know it is for a fact. As I said, I was never into the Harry Potter fandom, and to be honest, my knowledge of everything Harry Potter very limited. So the fact that I was able to enjoy this book without any prior knowledge, and that I was really able to ship these two characters that I previously did not care about at all, shows how good this book was. You could really understand why these characters would want to get together. You could understand also why they couldn't get together. It's a typical enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers. I feel like for them, both these descriptions fit. And to be honest, I don't remember when was the last time a book hooked me so much that I just missed sleep completely. Like, I would read it until I was finished with it. I realized that mostly happens with fanfics. Some of my favorite memories from my teenagehood is when I was reading fanfics until the early morning, and like, I just missed that. This was a very nostalgic experience for me. That's the power of a good fanfic. If you have any recommendations on good fanfics, it can be Hermione, it can be anything else, of any other fandom, because basically I've learned with this fanfic that I can read from pretty much any fandom as long as it's well written. Now, the final two books that I'm going to talk about are both books that kind of feature some sort of like heavy messaging, but in my personal opinion, one of them is done really well, the other one not so much. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This is an adult fantasy novel that is set in the city of Tiran, which is known for its industrial achievements, and all of them are done through the High Magistry. And our main character, Sayona, wishes to become the first ever woman who became a High Mage. And it is there that she meets Tommel, who was a nomadic hunter who comes from a different land, and the two of them uncover the secrets of the city and the Magistry itself. The first thing is, this book is kind of dark. It has some content warnings, specifically of gore, sexual assault, and suicidal ideations. But this story talks a lot about themes like oppression, discrimination, racism, sexism, etc. And even though there is obviously a plot, a lot of the book is just like discussions between Sayona and Tommel, and they're very important for the themes of the book. The main character is also heavily flawed. She's not good. A lot of the times she's not a good character, but that is also something that is very captivating about this story, I would say. And I genuinely did like the dynamic between Sayona and Tommel. I did not like the introduction of romance, but luckily it was also very small amount of it, so I could overlook it. This is also one of those books that immediately hooks you, like from the start. You're immediately invested in it. And another thing that I said is unique about this story is its world building, and especially the magic system, because the magic is kind of done through typewriters, and I thought that it was very cool. Now, the other book did not really have all the same themes. It did have some similar ones, and that is The Ministry of Time. This book won the Goodreads Choice Award for the best sci-fi book. This is kind of a time travel spy romance novel about a civil servant who works at this ministry that worked out time travel and is now sending from the past a couple of people that they call expats to try and live in the modern world. And our main character is overlooking one of these expats. This book reminded me a lot of Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which I've discussed in my last video, simply because it also kind of features these space-related themes. Well, space-related, I mean like time travel, stuff like that, but in a very slice of life type of way. This book is mainly also kind of discussions between characters. However, unlike in the previous book where I said that there is also a lot of discussions, but there is still plot, here I feel like the balance was not right between these two things, because for the majority of the book, nothing is happening. And then towards the end, like the last 15% are so action-packed. It becomes this like spy thriller type of a story. I don't know, like you just get so confused, and for me personally it became so goofy towards the end. I do like the themes of the book, I have to say, and I can see its potential. I feel like there is not a lot of time travel books that especially deal with like, okay, so how do we talk about time travel, and especially like pulling people from the past, especially from British past, and how do we put these people in the modern world, and how do we deal with topics like race and ethnicity. And I do like that these things were discussed, but I just feel like overall the book was really written in a weird way. I guess it just wasn't to my liking, but also I have to say I was uncomfortable a lot of the times. There was a whole paragraph just describing boobs from the only lesbian character, and the way it was described just made me so uncomfortable, because it was literally like men writing women. Overall, like I can see the potential in this book. I can see why it is liked, especially with the themes that it deals with. For me personally, just fell flat with the writing and I couldn't get behind it. Maybe also because I'm just not really usually interested in these types of books. So all in all, these were all the books that I wanted to talk about today. I still will make that video about romance in fiction. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to know what books you read recently, or well, since the start of this year. I still want those fanfic recommendations. So yeah, I will see you soon. Bye bye.